in many ways. We would all agree that democracy includes government by a majority. Each of us sharpen up our ideas of democracy. We know that democratic words and forms have been written into laws. But it is the way people practice democracy that really counts. Let's ask this man about he is a specialist who studies communities and the way people live in them. He goes about his job scientifically, observing, recording, analyzing, and reporting.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Students of society have been reporting their observations and analyses for a good many centuries. And as yet, there is not one single definition of democracy that they would all accept. There is one point, however, they would all agree on, and this is it. In thinking seriously of democracy, one must define his words carefully and use them consistently. When you have your own definitions clear, you know exactly what to look for in a community.
You can roughly locate any country in the world somewhere along a scale, running all the way from democracy to despotism. One community may be near the democracy end, another somewhere in the middle, and a third may be near the despotism end. The question is, what makes one community democratic? Is it the form of government?
Well, for one thing, avoid the comfortable idea that the mere form of government can of itself safeguard a nation against despotism. Germany, under President Hindenburg, was a republic. And yet in this republic, an aggressive despotism took root and flourished under Adolf Hitler. When a competent observer looks for signs of despotism in a community, he looks beyond fine words and noble phrases.
It stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Many observers have found that two workable yardsticks help in discovering how near a community is to despotism: the respect scale and the power scale.
Let's take respect first. A careful observer can measure on this scale how many citizens get an even break in a community. As a community moves away from democracy, respect is restricted to fewer people. A community is low on respect scale if common courtesy is withheld from large groups of people on account of their political attitudes. If people are rude to others because they think their wealth gives them that right, or because they don't like a man's race or his religion. In a democracy, respect must be shared. Sharing respect means that each shares the respect of all, not because of his wealth or his religion or his color, but because each is a human being and makes his own contribution to the community. From healing its sick, or managing its railroads, to running its trains. One sign of shared respect in a community is that everybody is given a fair chance to develop useful skills, and the chance to put these skills to effective use. And there is shared respect if various groups in the community recognize each other's right to hold different faiths and opinions. A power scale is another important yardstick of democracy. It gauges the citizens' share in making the community's decisions. Communities which concentrate decision-making in a few hands rate low on a power scale and are moving away from democracy. Like France under the Bourbon kings, one of whom said, "The state, I am the state." Today, democracy can ebb away in communities whose citizens allow power to become concentrated in the hands of political bosses. Because true democracy can flourish in a community only if there is shared power. That is to say, only if many people have a share in making decisions that the community will support with force, if necessary. More specifically, you can say that power is shared wherever regular popular elections are authorized and are actually held. There is shared power wherever people actually get out voluntarily and vote. And if they vote without interference or pressure from anybody. Look beyond the legal formalities of an election in measuring a community on a power scale to see if the ballot is really free. If the citizens can vote only the way they're told, a community approaches despotism. There is shared power if office holders are drawn from representative groups in society, if they include men from the farms, men from the law courts, men from the stores, men from the factories. In a democratic legislature, shared power shows itself in a strong opposition. Listen.
And that is why I'm confident the governor will have the support of the House on this bill.
Mr. Speaker, as usual, the honorable gentleman is quite wrong. He and the governor he serves so dutifully can expect no support for their policy from this House.
A strong opposition is made possible by an effective political party system. When legislatures become ceremonial assemblies only and have no real control over lawmaking, their community rates low on a power scale. In a downright despotism, opposition is dangerous whether the despotism is official or whether it is unofficial. The two most important signs of democracy, then, are shared respect and shared power. They, in turn, depend upon certain conditions.
The spread of respect and power in a community is influenced by certain conditions, which many observers measure by means of the economic distribution and information scales.
If a community's economic distribution becomes slanted, its middle income groups grow smaller, and despotism stands a better chance to gain a foothold. Where land is privately owned, one sign of a poorly balanced economy is the concentration of land ownership in the hands of a very small number of people. When farmers lose their farms, they lose their independence. This one can stay on, but no longer as his own boss. To the extent that this condition exists throughout a nation, the likelihood of despotism is increased. In past centuries, economic balance was improved when large feudal estates were gradually reorganized into independent farms as one part of the development of democracy. This creation of better economic balance aided the further growth of democracy. It is also a sign of poor economic balance in a community if it depends almost entirely on a single company, a factory, or a mine. If this condition exists over the nation as a whole, so that the control of jobs and business opportunities is in a few hands, despotism stands a better chance. Another sign of a poorly balanced economy is a taxation system that presses heaviest on those least able to pay. A larger part of a small income is spent on necessities, such as food. Sales taxes on such necessities hit the small income harder. In the days of the salt tax, feudal despotisms were partly sustained by this and other forms of sales tax.
A relationship between economic balance and democracy has been noted and reported for centuries by students of society. Aristotle said that a government made up of middle-income people has the best chance to be democratic. That was 2,000 years ago in Greece. And well over a century ago in America, James Madison warned that extremes of riches and poverty set group against group.
The social observers of our time have also noted that the development of democracy usually goes hand in hand with the growth of large middle-income groups. In today's world of giant technology, one of democracy's serious problems is how to maintain flourishing middle-income groups. Economic distribution, therefore, is an essential condition of democracy. Another one is information. A community rates low on an information scale when the press, radio, teaching in schools, and other channels of enlightenment are controlled by only a few people, and when citizens have to accept what they are told. In communities of this kind, democracy weakens. See how such a community trains its teachers.
Bear this in mind. Young people cannot be trusted to form their own opinions. This business about open-mindedness is nonsense. It's a waste of time trying to teach students to think for themselves. It's our job to tell them.
And when teachers put such training into practice, despotism grows rapidly. These children are being taught to accept uncritically whatever they are told. Questions are not encouraged.
How can you ask such a question? Have you got a textbook?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it say here that our law courts are always just?
Yes, ma'am.
Then how dare you question the facts? Sit down.
And so we aren't surprised when...
But it must be true. I saw it in this book right here.
And if books and newspapers and the radio are effectively controlled, the people will read and accept exactly what the few in control want them to. Government censorship is one form of control. A newspaper which breaks a government censorship rule can be suspended. Therefore, enlightenment is an important condition for democracy. As public education increases, democracy grows. In checking a community for democracy, we must find out whether it provides schools adjusted to the needs of its young people. But just being able to get books and newspapers is no guarantee of democracy. The newspapers of a real democracy meet these tests: balanced presentation of news, disclosure of source, competence of the staff. In applying these tests to newspapers, we find out, first of all, if they report both sides. If the news pages contain news only, and if opinion is kept for the editorial page. Next, we see if the paper says plainly who publishes and edits it, so we know which side they're on. Newspapers in a real democracy meet a third test: competence of staff. This test requires newspapermen to value accuracy and impartiality, and to interpret the news skillfully for the public. The competence test also requires newspapermen to use the services of experts.
I want 500 words on freedom of the press for our anniversary edition. How about it? But, Professor, you know more about the history of freedom of the press than probably any other man in the country.
Yes, that's right. I mean the responsibility of a free press and other forms of communication like the radio and the movies to enlighten the people into democracy.
As George Washington said in his farewell address, in proportion as the structure of government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. It is no less true today that enlightenment is an essential condition for democracy. What sort of community do you live in? Where would you place it on a democracy-despotism scale? To find out whether citizens get an even break, you can rate it on a respect scale. And to find out whether they share in the making of decisions, you rate it on a power scale. If you want to know what way it is likely to go in the future, rate it on scales for economic distribution and information. The lower your community rates on economic balance and enlightenment, the lower it is likely to rate on the respect and power scales. To make sure that democracy is safe in your community, first see whether you can find in it two distinct signs of democracy: shared respect and shared power. Then turn your attention to two important conditions on which they depend: economic balance and enlightenment. There is no standing still. The more economic balance and enlightenment, the more shared respect and shared power. Democracy is something that's never finished. If a community works to balance its economy, and if it works to enlighten its citizens, such a community can achieve shared respect, and it can achieve shared power. By working hard at it, the citizens of any community can achieve democracy